Today I want to talk about an incident mentioned in the book of Mark, in the 5th chapter, verses 21 through 43. Now, what's interesting here is that there is actually a story within a story. The story begins with a man, an official of the synagogue, coming to Jesus to ask him to come to his house and heal his sick daughter. So Jesus agrees. So on the way to the man's house to heal the daughter, all of a sudden Jesus is waylaid by a woman who has an issue of blood. So there is a second story within the first story. And it is actually that second story, the story of the woman who has the issue of blood, I want to talk about today. Because I find her story to be very interesting and a story that we can all relate to our real lives, the lives that we experience today. So today, let's talk about the woman with the issue of blood. To understand this story and the suffering this woman was going through, we really need to understand Jewish culture, and especially the Jewish culture of Israel of that time. What you have to do is go back to the Old Testament, to the laws, to discover that a woman who is hemorrhaging, a woman who is bleeding from her private area, is an unclean person. An unclean person who is not to be in the presence of others, is certainly not to be touched by others, otherwise they will become unclean. And when you are unclean, then you cannot go to the temple, you cannot go to the synagogue, you cannot be seen by a priest, you cannot receive holy rites, holy sacraments. You are left alone, you are quarantined, you are all by yourself. So for the normal period of a woman, this lasts a week, and so it is something they can endure. But for this woman in this story, we are told that her hemorrhaging, her issue of blood, has been going on for 12 years. 12 long years. Now, what does that mean? That means for 12 years, she has been in solitary confinement. She has been quarantined. She has been left alone. No other Jew will come to her because then they would become unclean. So no other Jew is going to visit her. So she is going to be lonely. She can't go to the marketplace where other Jews are. That's not allowed. So she has to get other people to do her shopping for her. And when it comes to physicians, she can't rely on Jewish physicians. They cannot be seen in her presence. So she has to rely on non-Jewish, probably Greek physicians. And they are charging her a lot of money to come see her, to come examine her and offer their treatments. And she is finding no relief, none whatsoever. So here is this poor woman living all alone, basically in solitary confinement, suffering from this physical pain, from this physical condition, for 12 solid years. Can you imagine being alone in your house with no comfort, no visitors, no friends for 12 years? How horrible. We are told that with the passage of time, this woman's condition didn't get any better after seeing all of these Greek physicians who came with their cures and their potions. It actually got worse. I imagine her whole situation got worse. I imagine she was very sad and very depressed. So we are told that one day she hears about Jesus. Well, what does she hear? She hears there is a great rabbi, a great teacher in the area, someone who is a great healer, someone who is known to make the lame walk, make the blind see, someone who relieves people of their demons, someone who can make the crippled be cured. So, for some odd reason, she decides to believe that this man can cure her issue of blood. Now let's stop right there and think about that. Why all of a sudden, upon hearing of Jesus, did this woman suddenly believe that he could cure her? In the book of Romans, Paul tells us that faith is a gift of God. Faith is something that is given to us by God. That is the ability to believe, the ability to accept the fact that Jesus is the Son of God, that he was sent here for man, that he is the Savior. That belief does not come from ourselves, Paul says, so that no one may brag, but it is in fact a gift from God. It is a gift of the grace of God. So I imagine that this woman one day hears of Jesus, and all of a sudden, she believes in him. She doesn't know why. She doesn't know how this belief suddenly came into her. She just all of a sudden has a deep, strong belief, a strong faith that has been given to her by God, that if she goes to this man, who really is the Son of God, that he really will heal her. And she doesn't think this, she doesn't hope this, she believes this in her heart and in her soul, not really knowing why, not really knowing where this belief came from, this faith she has in this man she has suddenly heard about, but she just knows that if she can get to Jesus, Jesus will heal her. And so, she leaves her solitary confinement, she leaves the solitude of her home, the safety of her home, and she goes out into the world in search of Jesus. Now, another thing you have to remember is that it wasn't proper for a woman to travel alone in the Jewish world, out by herself. Women either went out together in groups of 2, 3, 4, 5, or they went out with a man. But it wasn't really proper for a woman to go out by herself. A woman who was out by herself was, one of those women. A woman that other good women and certainly good men did not associate with. So, here is this woman out on the road traveling alone. Now, we are also told in the story that when Jesus sets out for the synagogue official's home, he is pressed by a large crowd. There's a great crowd of people traveling with him, and they are all packed together tightly, around him. They're all jostling each other. They're probably shoulder to shoulder, hip to hip, walking down this narrow road. So, when the woman comes along, she comes upon this huge crowd. She knows that somewhere at the front of the crowd is this man Jesus she must get to be healed. But what to do? What to do? Now the story says that she came up behind Jesus and touched his cloak, for she believed, and here again she probably didn't understand why she believed, where this belief came from, but she believed in her heart and in her soul that if she simply touched the cloak of Jesus, she would be healed. So the story says that she came up behind Jesus and touched his cloak. Now, here's the thing. He was surrounded by this huge press of men. And here she was, this woman that men would not associate with. So I don't imagine that she just elbowed her way through this crowd of men. No, I don't think that's how it happened at all. Here's what I believe happened. I believe that coming upon the rear of this crowd of men moving down the road, she decided that the only way to make her way to the front would be to get down on her hands and knees and crawl between the legs of the men toward the front. So I believe this is the scene we have. This large group of men pressing around Jesus, walking down this dusty country road, and all of a sudden this woman is on her hands and knees crawling between the legs of these men, beneath their knees. Now, when these men, these Jewish men, see this single woman all by herself, probably one of those kind of women, I'm sure they do not have sympathy for her. I'm sure they do not say, "Oh, ma'am, here, let me help you up. What's going on here? What's the matter?" No, I imagine they kicked her. I imagine they spat upon her. I imagine they cursed her. So, here she is in this horrible situation, crawling on her hands and knees, probably in pain from her issue of blood, crawling through the legs of these men who are being rude and mean to her. She's doing this for one purpose, because she believes that Jesus will heal her. And so for that, she is enduring this punishment. So now this woman, crawling on her hands and knees, in the dust, being kicked, being spat upon, being cursed, finally sees in front of her a dark white cloak, just pure white, and she knows that is her goal. She knows that is what she must touch. So she crawls farther and farther, and slowly lays down and stretches out her hand as much as she can, and the finger of a right hand touches the hem of the garment of Jesus, and instantly she is healed. Instantly, she feels the pain vanish. Instantly, she feels the blood dry up. Instantly, she knows with joy, with relief, that she has been healed. And so she lays there face down, supplicating herself to God in the dust of the road, and the crowd walks on. With the crowd pressing all upon Jesus and pressing forward, it is a few minutes. Actually, they pass the woman by, leaving her there lying on the road, when Jesus suddenly stops the crowd and says, "Hey, who touched me?" Well, his disciples look around and they're laughing, going, "Are you serious? Look at all this crowd all around you. Everybody pressing shoulder to shoulder, hip to hip. And you say, 'Who touched you? Are you serious?'" And he says, No, wait. I felt power flow from me. Someone touched me." And so then they all stop and they all turn. And there, standing up behind them in the road, is this woman. And she says, "It was I, sir. I touched you." So now, the crowd parts, they move aside, and the woman walks forward, walks toward Jesus. And when she gets to Jesus, she kneels down in front of him, and she tells him her story. She tells him how she has suffered for 12 long years, how many physicians have come with their cures and their potions, and none have worked, and in fact she actually got worse. And then she tells of the morning when she awoke, hearing of Jesus and believing in Jesus, believing that he would heal her, and her decision to come to him, and her decision to get down on her hands and knees and crawl to him in supplication, to reach out to Jesus, to finally touch the hem of his garment and be healed. And he says to the woman, "Woman, your faith has healed you." At that point, the crowd must have been completely amazed at having known that this unclean woman was in their presence, but now she is completely healed because of her faith in Jesus. Jesus tells the woman to go in peace, and so she does. She departs, and then the rest of the story about the synagogue ruler and his daughter continues, and that's another story. But think of this woman now. After 12 years of suffering, now she's whole. Now she's healed. Now she gets her life back. And what must that have been like? Not just filled with joy and peace, but I imagine she was filled with a new mission. Having been through what she had been through, a woman left alone because of her affliction, I imagine now she thought of all of the other women in her area who also suffered in some way, who also were left alone, were in pain, were in sorrow, were in loneliness. And I imagine she devoted the rest of her life to ministering to those women because of what Jesus had done for her, because of the faith God had given her in Jesus and the healing it had brought to her. I imagine now she wanted to share that faith, share that healing with all of the other women she knew in the area who were also suffering one way or another. In this way, her faith expanded out and continued the community of God. The lesson from this story is really quite simple and really quite clear. Are you in pain and suffering? Is there some issue in your life that cuts you off from the rest of society? Maybe it's a financial affliction, maybe it's an addiction, maybe it's just constant worrying, constant anxiety. If there is a problem in your life that has cut you off from the world, has left you alone, has put you in solitary confinement, there is a relief. You can get down on your hands and knees and go to Jesus. Go to Jesus in faith, believing that He will relieve you, that He will take away your suffering, that He will heal you, that He will transform you. His faith will transform you. If you allow God to place that faith in your heart and you really believe in Jesus, then you will find that you are healed, that you are transformed, that you are set free from whatever affliction you have, and you can go in peace, as the woman with the issue of blood went in peace and started a new life. So in the same way, you can have a happy new life. Peace.